Murder from the Skies, America's Systematic Massacre of Japan's Innocents. 1. The systematic massacre of non-combatants in Japan. During World War II, the United States not only dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also carried out large-scale firebombing campaigns that devastated major Japanese cities and slaughtered countless civilians. These attacks were not strategic bombings, but deliberate, systematic mass killings of non-combatants. The mastermind behind this massacre was General Curtis LeMay of the U.S. Air Force. Under his command, American forces targeted civilian residential areas rather than military facilities, turning Japanese cities into infernos of destruction. Conclusion: the United States was not merely waging war against the Japanese military. It was conducting a mass extermination campaign against the Japanese civilian population. The firebombing of cities and the atomic bombings constituted war crimes and inhumane acts. 2. The firebombing of major Japanese cities. The Tokyo firebombing, the deadliest air raid in history. Date March 10, 1945. Method: 334 B-29 bombers conducting a napalm firebombing raid. Death toll: approximately 100,000, the highest single-day death toll in an air raid, excluding nuclear attacks. Strategy: targeting densely populated wooden residential areas to maximize civilian casualties. The Tokyo firebombing did not target military facilities. It deliberately incinerated civilian homes. Napalm firebombs engulfed entire neighborhoods in flames, burning people alive in their homes and on the streets. Hacker 3. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, crimes against humanity. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped the uranium bomb Little Boy on Hiroshima, killing approximately 140,000 people by the end of the year. 3 days later, on August 9th, the B-29 Bockscar dropped the plutonium bomb Fat Man on Nagasaki, killing around 70,000. The U.S. justified these bombings by claiming they were necessary to end the war. But in reality, they were pre-planned mass killings. The decision to drop the bombs had already been made before Japan had a chance to respond to the Potsdam Declaration. Japan was actively seeking a diplomatic resolution through Soviet mediation, meaning the war could have ended without atomic bombings. The fact that two different types of bombs were used, uranium in Hiroshima, plutonium in Nagasaki, suggests that the U.S. was conducting human experiments on civilians to compare the effects of each weapon. Conclusion: the atomic bombings were not military necessities, but war crimes and acts of mass murder. If the standards of the Tokyo trials were applied fairly, Truman, LeMay, Tibbets, and Sweeney would have been prosecuted as war criminals. Truman's Diary, the evidence of a pre-planned massacre. An important piece of evidence proving that the atomic bombings were not necessary but pre-planned is President Harry S. Truman's diary entry from July 25, 1945. In this diary, Truman explicitly states that the U.S. had already decided to use the bomb against Japan before Japan had even responded to the Potsdam Declaration. This weapon is to be used against Japan between now and August 10th. Furthermore, he claimed that the bomb would only target military objectives and not women and children. However, this was an outright lie, as the majority of the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were civilians, including tens of thousands of women and children. He also wrote, "It is certainly a good thing that Hitler's crowd or Stalin's did not discover this atomic bomb." This statement reveals the hypocrisy of the U.S. Truman acknowledged that if Hitler or Stalin had used the bomb, it would have been an atrocity, yet the U.S. went ahead and used it anyway. Conclusion: Truman's own diary proves that the atomic bombings were not necessary for ending the war, but were pre-planned and politically motivated acts of mass murder. 5. The lie of necessary for ending the war. The U.S. has long justified the atomic bombings and firebombings as necessary measures to end the war. But historical facts contradict this claim. The decision to drop the bombs was made before the Potsdam Declaration was issued, proving that Japan's surrender terms were irrelevant. Japan was actively seeking peace negotiations through the Soviet Union, making the atomic bombings unnecessary. The Soviet Union's declaration of war on Japan on August 8, 1945, played a decisive role in Japan's surrender, meaning nuclear attacks were not the key factor in ending the war. The second bombing of Nagasaki was entirely unnecessary. further proving that the US intended to use Japan as a testing ground for nuclear weapons. Conclusion: the atomic bombings and firebombings were war crimes, not strategic necessities. The claim that they were required to end the war is nothing more than a post hoc justification to excuse mass murder. 6. Final conclusion: recognizing the true war criminals. The firebombing of Japanese cities and the atomic bombings were war crimes and mass killings of non-combatants. If war crimes were judged fairly, Truman, LeMay, Tibbets, and Sweeney should have been prosecuted. Final proposals: the United States must acknowledge its own war crimes instead of justifying them as necessary. International law must apply equally to all nations, not just to the defeated. War crimes should be evaluated based on legal principles, not the perspective of the victors. The victims of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the firebombed cities of Japan must never be forgotten. The true war criminals are not those who were prosecuted, but those who were never held accountable.